Well, the ending was bittersweet, but what a year of progress it was for the CHGO Fire. Gregg Berhalter is already at work making more additions for next season. We're going to reflect on the year that was. We're going to look to the future that might be today on CHGO Fire. This is a season recap and reflection edition of CHGO Fire. I'm Alex Campbell, and we've got the crew back together from previewing the playoff run. To wrap things up, Joe Chatz has stuck around from CHGO Stars, pulling double duty. Shout out to you, Joe.
I wasn't allowed to leave, if anyone's curious.
Yeah, we're keeping him prisoner here in the West Loop. And then Tim Hotze, Menaren 97. Welcome back, sir. Great to have you as we, have a more positive conversation than the conversation Joe and I just got done having.
I just appreciate that you didn't actually shackle me to the chair like you did, Joe.
I mean, that's
you can't see my ankle.
Yeah, you're giving away the secrets that are out of the
And
shot.
to be fair, Joe brought the shackles.
And they're fuzzy. You know, what can we do?
Yeah, you know what? We don't question it. Again, he just voluntarily talked about the Chicago Stars with me for 30 minutes, so, he's just into that kind of thing. All right, let's talk about the news first before we get into the season, because the Fire are actually making it. They have made the signing of Andre Franco from Porto permanent. They negotiated what was reported as a new fee with the club. We have to assume, I would think that is a smaller number than they previously agreed to, given that Andre Franco currently does not have a functioning knee. Tim, you are the newcomer to the room, so I'll start with you. Safe to say this is worth the risk, despite the fact that Franco's not going to be back till next summer and is going to be rehabbing a serious injury?
Yeah, I think that we don't really know more about the injury other than the surgery was successful. So the timelines do vary a lot. And, there is risk, like you said, because you don't know exactly if the player you get out after an ACL surgery is going to be the same one before the injury. At the same time, I think that it shows that the team is willing to build for the long term, and it's not all about 2026 or even 2027. It's about getting guys that fit the culture, that fit the project, that are excited to be here to build a platform of success that you can build on for the future.
Yeah, because it was clear that Franco liked being here, that he was an immediate fit in the locker room. And then beyond just the question of the fee and his future here, it comes down to the player and, hey, where do you want to do this rehab? Where would we like you to do this rehab? And if both parties say we would like that to be at Randolph and 14th Street there at the Endeavor Health Performance Center, then good, make that happen.
Winter in Chicago, exactly where you want to be rehabbing an ACL.
Yeah, exactly. I hope Andre isn't in town right now, because we just got the earliest substantial snow in years.
He's at the United Center today. They just posted him taking some free throws, which I guess his knee's okay to do that.
Fair. Okay, well, we'll take that as a good sign.
Doing my job here.
I guess, yeah. Joe, also, when this was talked about on the show last week, they have made the signing of Anton Saletros from AIK. I look forward to being informed later that we are just butchering his pronunciation at this point. More depth to midfield, veteran experience, active international, probably replacement for Romy Kouame. The fee is in excess reportedly of $3 million. Much like the move for Franco to stay, I assume this is a move we all feel pretty decently about.
Yeah, left-footed midfielder, floor raiser, again, does some things as a veteran that should help the squad. That left foot on set pieces should be huge. He's shown an ability to hit some bangers from that. So if it doesn't have to be like Guti or Philip Zinkernagel, two right-footed guys, as it was for most of the year over set pieces, that would just be a massive thing for this team to be able to have. They showed they're pretty good on set pieces this year. The Franco thing, I'm trying to figure out the numbers. There were some that was reported. I still have to confirm some of it. But it's one of those deals where Porto still, it looks like, has a 50% on sell-on fee. So he's going to be here for a while. That is the intent of the Fire, intend to keep him for a while. So with those two players, you've got guys who want to spend what looks like the peaks of their careers in Chicago and in MLS. And isn't that what MLS wants to be? A lot of these guys, you're complaining for so long about the guys coming for their retirements, coming for whatever it is. If they're coming from 28 to 32, understanding this might be their maximum earning potential and there are the values of playing on a different schedule, it's good to see. And this Saletros guy should be a good player We'll see. It's going to take time for him to integrate with this squad. It's probably going to take him 6 months to really adjust to MLS and the pace differences and just the climate differences from playing where he was. So a good signing, good that it was done early. The team still has a lot of time to make other decisions, but getting these two things out of the way is huge and opens up the loan market, especially because now you can say we've got these players. Now let's see if maybe we can take a swing on someone who might be younger and may have a little bit of risk to him. But now that we have this depth, we can really go for something.
Right. And also, if you're wondering, given that he is an active Sweden international, is this going to be an issue with the World Cup next year? No, because Sweden are rock bottom of their qualifying
they're
group.
not formally out. It's so hard to not qualify from UEFA. Like there's you're gonna play New Zealand or something.
You don't believe in Graham Potter? Come on, he's coming in there to speak Swedish. He's a successful stint at West Ham in my eyes until this. I think he's perfect for the job. But he left Saletros off of the most recent squad for Sweden, so there is that. He might be on the way out with a new boss. So if that is the case, and we're getting a guy, well, if the Fire are getting a guy trying to prove that he wants to be on a World Cup roster for 6 months, that's massive, right? Just to start his career.
And either way, right, like even if it's out with this manager, I think that at his age, you'd think it's not an incredibly deep Sweden team, but it is still a team that competes, in European competition. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't be moving here if he thought that put him out of the picture for the national team. And that's huge, right? Like it used to be MLS was basically career suicide for a lot of guys in Europe. We heard Shaqiri talking about that, how, guys here were not going to get noticed unless they moved back to Europe. And so just the fact that he was willing to make that move now, I think says something about the way that Berhalter and his staff have been able to sell the project to him.
Absolutely, yeah. They are currently below both Slovenia and Kosovo, who, if the qualifying ended today, would be moving into the playoff round of UEFA qualification. So something to keep an eye on, potentially for a tertiary, Fire interest. However, in terms of discussion about Fire midfielders, the one being talked about most over the last week is, of course, Brian Gutierrez obtaining his Mexican passport. That's not that hard of a process when you have at least one parent who was born in Mexico. So Guti doing this was just, filling out some paperwork, sending some stuff through the mail, and then, taking a quick flight down south. This would allow him to represent the Mexican national team. He has 2 non-cap tying appearances for the U.S., Potentially, though, the more relevant thing here is this would allow him to count as a domestic player for Liga MX roster rules should a team from Mexico want to come in for him. Tim, this is probably the more likely end of the spectrum, right? I know, I don't think he's probably in contention for the U.S. or Mexico's World Cup roster, but given that there's been, chatter for a while about the idea that, as somebody with, Mexican-American heritage, he'd be appealing to teams in Liga MX. This certainly seems like it would, the main purpose of this is, should a transfer like that materialize, this makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's the impetus behind the move. I mean, Alex Calabrese interviewed him earlier this year, and he basically said that he was committed to the USMNT. Obviously, that changes, right? I think 2026 is not really in the picture for him making a World Cup roster, but if his career takes the right path and, it's getting close to 2030 and one team is calling him in and the other isn't, it's really hard for professional athletes to say no going to a World Cup. And we've seen guys, find ways to get passports to a country where it's like one grandparent just because that's the ticket. And if that's what's available to them, you're going to really strongly consider it regardless of where your heart may be.
And Joe, I'm going to have you fill in the blank here in a moment because, of course, immediately what happens after all this is, oh, hey, Chivas is potentially interested, which, Guti is known to be a fan of the club. They have a Mexican-only policy, but they recently expanded it to allow Mexican-Americans, and they've signed several in doing that, including Cade Cowell, Efrain Alvarez, and most recently Richie Ledesma coming back from the Netherlands. All that being said, Joe, assuming the Fire get a price they like, selling Brian Gutierrez would be what?
Smart if they get the right price, but there's no rush going into the World Cup cycle. It's another thing where he needs to step up if he wants to be in these pictures. If he's not going to be in the USMNT picture for 2026, if he sees through, I assume his agents are talking to people. I assume he has people through U.S. Soccer and in Mexico telling him what to do in these circumstances. And he is 6 good months away from potentially breaking into Mexico's squad. Mexican-American guy. There's a lot to sell for the Mexican Soccer Federation or Football Federation if they want to do that. But I don't think there's really a need to rush him out the door if you're the Fire, especially in the first part of next year, if you're not able to get the fee or a replacement player. He's still, look at his numbers from this year. Was it 12 goal contributions in less minutes than you'd expect? He played really well. It's just all his options are open now. I don't blame him. U.S. Soccer made it known that their scout was at the wild card game to see Alex Freeman and Chris Brady. Goody was not on any of the press about that. That is not an accident.
Right.
So it's in his best interest, even just for international soccer, to make sure Mexico's an option down the line.
To your point, though, if he is going to leave, the Fire would much rather it be as soon as possible so they have room to assess the roster, decide, do we want to use that DP spot? What are we going to do with it?
Well, we also know the Fire have been swinging for a big name with the third DP spot, and until then, they kept 4 U22 slots. They would be able to do that if they want and switch in the summer, depending on when that big name would land. Those typically are more likely to arrive in the summer, like we saw, Muller and Son Heung-min this summer. And that would also coincide with Franco's, potential, a time when you'd think that he would probably be ready to be getting minutes back with the Fire.
Right.
So all that timing could work out. But I think that, if it's the right number, look, the Berhalter front office has shown that they're dynamic. They can pivot. They can find options either on loan or permanently. And so, I think that if it's the right number that would make Gutierrez happy, he probably goes. And look, that can be a good step for him. We saw, another Fire Academy product midfielder, Georgi Mihailovic, like his career, took off in Montreal, made a trip to Europe that didn't work out so well, and now he's a DP for Toronto, right?
Right, and in terms of former Fire attacking midfield homegrown players, there's a lot of carryover there. All right, let's one of the main reasons we're here today is to look back at 2025. So we're gonna give a few superlatives out. We're not gonna have a discussion about team MVP because that would be kind of silly. It's Philip Zinkernagel. He will at some point here be named, player of the season for the team. That hasn't happened yet, but that's kind of an any day now sort of deal as they'll slowly trot out those awards. Just a reminder, if you're on YouTube, you can see his stat line from the year, just 30 goal contributions and even 15-15 split during the regular season, then plays through injury in the playoffs. He's a guy who just seems happy to be here, seems to really be enjoying playing for this team, and is going to be really central to whatever the Fire are up to next year. We have talked about Phil plenty this season, so we're going to take a moment to talk about some other guys. Tim, I'm going to start with you. Who is your most improved player on this roster in 2025?
It has to be Sergio Orhel Jr., right? Like he makes his MLS debut 2 seasons ago, doesn't see the pitch for the 2 seasons after that, and he's back. And not only is he back getting some minutes, which alone would have been huge, but he's got over 2,000 minutes. He becomes a regular starter for the team at different stretches of the season, and now looks like minimum like a mid-quality MLS midfielder.
Right.
When before, I think the question was, does he leave the professional game when his contract is up? So that's just massive progress from him.
Right. Joe, I think we'd agree that Sergio Orhel has had a great year. Anybody else you'd throw into that conversation?
Yeah, just Sergio came into his body this year, grew into everything, got the extension, very much was looking like he was going to be on his way out. I would say Chris Brady, just because simply making that step for him of being able to play with his feet. Remember how that was the real issue good for him in the last few years. Major learning curve. Dealt with the red card against Orlando and bounced back from that. Gets the USMNT call-ups. I think it's definitely him. And if we want to throw in another one, Jay Davila, just from where he started to where he ended, I think he might be the best player on this team. He has aspirations to be in the highest level of soccer, and I think he can realize them. I don't know how long he's going to be in Chicago if he does. Right. But those two guys are two major standouts alongside Orhel Jr., who impressed everybody, right? Even if he kind of fell off at the end of the year, you can call it a rookie wall, whatever, when you consider how much he's grown physically, literally, in the last year, and the steps he took from being literally on the fringes of the roster. I thought he was going to be playing more Fire 2 soccer this year and becomes a clear MLS starter who should be getting more minutes next year.
Absolutely. And I think, to your point, Joe, if Jay Davila improves as much next season as he did this year, it's going to be very hard for the Fire.
There's no reason to think that he can't. It's not at all a crazy thought, right?
Right, because if you find, if a guy that age, once he stops growing and can kind of actually fully fill out, this is the thing. It's, again, we talk about it with Orhel. It's even though Sergio's a much smaller guy, he really wasn't filled out. He was a string bean of a kid, and finally this year we see him looking like an adult soccer player out there. I'm going to a quick shout out to a guy who I guess would more be a comeback player of the year type. Shout out to Andrew Gutman.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Great player.
and basically an Iron Man for the Fire this season after hardly playing last year. So his ability to stay fit and stay out there and be consistent. And then the man at the other fullback position, Jonathan Dean, again, a guy who continues to exceed expectations and I think has, it's really impressive the career he has carved out in Chicago. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys about is what's your moment of the season? And you can take this any way you want. Joe, I'll start with you this time. What's going to be the thing that sticks with you from 2025 in Chicago Fire?
Not even a discussion. Tom Barlow hat trick at DC United. Because remember, Hugo didn't play in that game, if I recall correctly. So they had the call up for Jason Shokaluk. You look at the reverse fixture where Morel scores the bicycle kick at the end of the game after Benteke skies the net on a PK. Like it felt like another trap game, and to see the Fire come out and it's Tom Barlow of all people, one of the nice guys that you want to root for to get that hat trick. That was one of the most fun days as a reporter, just because there's journalism and then there's understanding the context of how hard some of these people work when it doesn't necessarily go on the stat sheet. And that was just a day where everybody was happy, except DC people. But everybody else was
DC
Both of the
United
fans.
people were not happy most days this season. So, that was not remarkable.
It's just a Saturday night for them. Yeah.
Correct. It's like, 1 week it's one thing. 1 week you're hiring Mesut Ozil's agent who's never worked in soccer before as your GM. The next day you're getting up a hat trick to Tom Barlow.
And he does work incredible. Chris Brady actually stopped us, physically grabbed me on our way out from the locker room to talk about, to call out how much he works and how important he was on the squad after he scored his first goal in 2024. Yeah. And I think that says something about just how good he is in the locker room and the work that he puts in, and to see him get a hat trick, first Fire hat trick since 2017. Was insane.
Yeah, he won Player of the Week because there was no games that weekend. Look at that list. He's right next to Messi on that list. Tom Barlow made history in 2025, and for guys that work as hard as he does, who have grinded out the type of career he has, it's just one of those things that you should always smile at when you look at it in the Wikipedia entries down the line.
Wisconsin men's Messi, because the Wisconsin University of Wisconsin Messi's Rose Lavelle. But all due respect there, and sorry Chris Mueller for right now. Tom is on top of the power rankings. Tim, how about you?
I just think it has to be the win over Orlando, right? Especially just the vibe and the atmosphere.
The Guti goal specifically, I think might be the moment.
It felt like old Fire games from the mid-2000s when the team still expected every season they'd be taking home hardware, and the fans expected that too, right? The supporters section was completely packed. The vibes were just immaculate, and SeaTac saw a home team win, a home men's team win, a knockout game for the first time since 2009. Outside of Leagues Cup and some Open Cup games.
Yeah, right. No, I think those two definitely stand out. Can a procedural vote in local government count as a moment of the season to get the full approving? Of the Fire Stadium?
Not on most sports podcasts, but hey, man, it's your show.
Well, why not? Why not? Yeah.
Yeah, again, that's very much future. But yeah, it was infrastructure year for the Fire. Obviously, the Endeavor Health Center opens at the start of the year. The
Put
year
that on the banner
in my office.
Infrastructure year. Yeah, just to have Mansueto every time he does a press conference, trot out some sign on the front of the podium.
Because he does so many press conferences.
Exactly. Just happy.
Hey, half the time that he does, he just drops a massive bombshell.
That was great. That was great. Yeah, never forget the Tribune left before that story was dropped.
Yep, that awkward.
Yeah, I mean the comm staff didn't. They're like, we didn't know that was coming out. We're like,
that's why you stick around as a reporter and ask questions. It's almost like should have paid me to do it.
Anyway, so yeah, I think those two kind of stand out as the most fun of the season. No, certainly, my pick is Brian Gutierrez jumping into the supporter section. Just get more of that, please. As we look at this kind of generally, though, guys, I think when we think about how this season went versus what the expectations were or should have been at the beginning of it, I kind of feel like this was pretty much the script. In terms of if you had looked at what would we like to see the Fire accomplish in year one of Gregg Berhalter, I don't, could it have been better? Sure. There are a couple moments where, if that DC goal at home doesn't go in or this, that, the other, and you avoid the wild card game, maybe you finish 6th or 7th or something. But overall, I don't think I've got too many notes on the way 2025 went from a soccer perspective for this team.
I think where the team landed in the tables maybe where you would have expected. If you told me 53 points, I mean, that's enough for fourth in the East a couple years ago. It was enough to get second in the West 2 years ago.
It's the Fire's second best tally in terms of either total points or points per game since 2003 when they won the Supporters Shield and went to MLS Cup.
Yeah,
2017 is the only other year in there that was this good.
So like I was really afraid that the narrative was going to be the team finished in like 52 points, an amount that would be enough to make the postseason under pretty much any year in MLS history, regardless what the playoff formats was, but ended up in like 10th place behind like the Red Bulls or maybe like the Revs are a little bit earlier in September, right? Like, and that the narrative would have to be, guys, the team really did improve, but they didn't quite get there. So the fact that they were able to do it despite the East being such a gauntlet, I think was huge. And the other thing is, it was fun soccer. I think we were expecting it to be a bunch of like 2-1 games, 1-0 games, stuff like that, grinding out results. 68 goals, man.
It was not what, like, again, it's been said by so many people. I mean, Matt Doyle from MLS Soccer said it on the show a few weeks ago, basically being like, the thing you expected Berhalter to do was sort the defense out first and then figure the attack out later. It was the reverse this year. It's like, hey, we're going to be a little soft at the back, and let's go out there and play some fun soccer. Because, Joe, the other big concern this season was having Gregg Berhalter as both the head coach and the sporting director. Are there pitfalls to that? And I think to touch back on this, I think Jay Davila is an interesting case study in this, because I think there's a scenario where if those are two different people involved in that process and you see the first 3 or 4 games that Davila has, maybe a coach who's just the coach does not stick with him and show that patience. We saw, I think, a big pro of this process was Gregg Berhalter's also looking long-term. He's not looking out for his job as a coach. And so while it might be, on the front end frustrating, he's got the ability to always be looking long-term and be patient with decisions.
Well, you don't want to be reactive when you're on a 5-year deal and you're in 2 jobs, right? And the Fire could have been reactive and really overdone it at center back this summer. They brought in Waterman on a long-term deal as well, just because it was a decent enough trade that they could find. But if they really wanted to force something, they could have had another center back in the summer when they really needed it. I know there was a point, I think it was in like July, Tim, where Greg went up to us and he was like, yeah, we're just going to have to outscore everybody. This is kind of where we're at. This is the team we are. So that's going to be the mentality. And if we can come out and get a clean sheet, right, we're going to defend like we want to. We're going to do all these things, but it just hasn't reflected on clean sheets. The numbers were bad in that regard this year. But at least they understood that and they weren't denying who they were.
Yeah.
For everything we heard, it was this team is going to have to outscore you. We're going to be on the front foot. All of it. The Davila part of it as well, when you consider the patience that was allowed. The Fire brought him in earlier by paying a little bit more, and I assume that had to do with why he was playing early on, even though he clearly was out of his depth, while dealing with, again, like 40 different things off the pitch that would stress everybody out. Yeah. So this team making the playoffs was great, but you can also see that there's a process that makes sense. Also helps when your lead striker plays most of the year, is pretty healthy, and will run his tail off. But that covered
shout out Ugo has not been mentioned yet in this podcast,
yeah,
but
like
credit to a quietly great year for Ugo Kuipers.
When Gregg's Berhalter system relies on a high press and your club record signing is continually running for 90-plus minutes, you can't teach that. You can't expect that. And it makes it seem like the perfect coach for Hugo Kuipers might be Gregg Berhalter, simply because they work on the same wavelength.
Right. No, he's and Kuipers, just again, the amount of full 90s he played this season was just generally nuts.
And how he looked in it, right? Like, and that's the thing. Like, Tom Barlow, I think, showed us that like he is capable of doing those things. Tom Barlow, I thought, was brought in to press more than to score, and frankly, like Hugo Kuipers was just out pressing him, which is like, despite having started the game, which is nuts.
Yeah, Barlow's whole thing is like, yeah, I'm tall, I'm athletic, I'm a Red Bull guy, I'm going to go run a lot late in games. And no, running a lot late in games was just a thing that Hugo Kuipers did instead. Speaking of Tom Barlow, we've talked about him quite a bit on the show. We're going to touch on him a bit more here as we look at the Fire's list of free agents, contract options. These are guys whose futures right now have not been announced. Jack Elliott played 33 games this season, captained the club, is top of the list here. He's on a club option, as is Tom Barlow, Omar Gonzalez, and Sam Williams. Romani Kwame had a buy option in his loan deal. It looks like we can already assume that has not been picked up, so that is that. Chase Gasper, who did not play any this season as he continued to deal with injuries. He's a full free agent and is eligible for MLS free agency. Harold Osorio is out of contract, and it's not exactly clear what his contract status is.
It's basically impossible for him to fit on a MLS senior roster because his full acquisition cost would then hit the MLS team's roster, even though he'd already played through a contract in MLS Next Pro, which just unfortunately makes him an unaffordable risk for basically any MLS team.
Yeah, he's not eligible for free
Fire,
agency,
rather.
and so it's and if he doesn't have a role with the Fire, he's going to have to go outside of Major League Soccer's ecosystem if he's going to get minutes next year. So assuming he has to go searching, all the best to him. Of this list, though, for sure Jack Elliott is getting signed, right?
It's all about the price.
$915,000 for those not on YouTube. It was the price this season. That number's going to go up.
So that's about to Joel Waterman, just to put that in perspective, right? So I think that's why Joe is saying it is about the price of the option. And look, the team still has, the team is much improved. It still has multiple needs. And I think, going back for a second, the reason that the offense was so good and the defense was the part that had problems is in MLS, where you're limited with how you spend money, you can drop a lot of money on good attacking pieces in ways that don't really make long-term salary cap sense to do in the back line. Mm-hmm. Jack Elliott was, I think, the best center back available that was MLS proven last offseason. We saw how good he was. He was the team captain for the vast majority of the year, but he's also just a very expensive option. And I think if you're now looking, you've got Joel Waterman, another MLS proven center back, full Canadian international with aspirations to be, making the squad and also playing in the World Cup. And so you could maybe afford to risk getting a guy from outside MLS, partnering with him and pay less there as well. It means bringing in two center backs, but I think that, again, Greg's going to evaluate all the options here.
You could also do the thing, Joe, that they could just do what they did last season, which was, hey, we're not gonna re-sign Jack Elliott, but we're gonna just go out and decide who we think the best free agent center back on the MLS market available is. I don't believe Miles Robinson has signed a new contract in Cincinnati yet, and so there's an argument that you could say you can go get somebody younger with maybe a higher ceiling and just do the exact same thing again, and maybe instead of a 1-year prove-it deal, you can get somebody to sign for 2 years.
I think you let Elliott go to free agency and you offer him a 3-year deal with a lower annual average and you see what happens, because he brings a lot to the squad and his contributions on set pieces this year was massive, right? This team was not good at set pieces in 2024, and that was one of their best sources of goal scoring in 2025. And a large part of it, literally a large part, was Jack Elliott. So they need to try to bring him back, but it's not a thing where you're going to break the bank to bring him back. In MLS, if you want to be at $1 million as a center back, you have to be dominant. And Jack Elliott was very, very good. He was not dominant. And if that is going to be the case, they need to lower the salary slot just because of MLS's stupid rules. I want Jack to get paid as much as possible. I hate MLS salary rules, but in
a world where his
production was not at the over $1 million total compensation.
Right. If we're in a world where MLS has just a straight hard salary cap, like say the NHL, Jack Elliott is getting re-signed and you're figuring out the math later. The rest of these guys, you think any of them are back next year?
I think probably not Tom Barlow, because then Gam, I believe, goes to
and also with
Red
the amount of
Bull.
minutes he played, hello Jason Shukaluk
David
could just
Pareva.
do that.
Yeah, there's going to be other options.
Sam Williams,
out.
I think, is a possibility. The team seems
Just
to really
'cause if
believe
he's
in
so
him.
cheap.
And they also, spent, good Gam to get his homegrown rights.
Exactly.
So,
He has value in MLS too as a trade option. He's a good player. Should not have just timing got him the MLS deal, frankly, and all power to him for doing that. But he is a good option to have in the offseason too, because if someone wants a homegrown cheap option for trade, he is a great option because he's not far removed from being very, very good at North Carolina.
Right. No. So again, I'd agree. I'd say the same thing, that I think at that price, I think there's no real.
It's all about that's the thing. All of these things, it just becomes money calculations. It doesn't matter how much you like the guys. It's one of the things that's difficult about MLS rosters is you can't keep guys you like around. It makes it hard to put, guys' faces on posters and billboards that are recognizable in there year after year, just because it's all about these money calculations.
Eric in the chat says he wants to see more of Christopher Cupps next year. That'll be interesting because obviously Cupps was really working his way into regular minutes and then broke his leg on international duty, and that was kind of the end of that, unfortunately. He's currently at the U17 World Cup, 2 wins and 2. for the U.S., so they are through to the round of, is it 16 or 32? I don't even know.
32. They play tomorrow at 8:45 against the Czech Republic U17 at 8:45 in the morning.
So Cups is basically a locked-in starter for that team. They don't have a lot of defensive depth, and he's a guy who has played real pro minutes, which that team has some all-stars on the front half of the field, less so in the back. And so Cups is, even if he had a bit of a slip last game, but even if that continues, like, he's going to play every minute that he can for that team. So if you're interested in seeing Christopher Cups play soccer right now, I believe FS2 is carrying a lot of those games. So if you get FS2, you can go have yourself some Christopher Cups. All right, before we get out of here today, let's look big picture, and I'm going to take the phrasing of one of our diehards. This is from Austin on the Discord. What should fans be most excited about during the offseason? Are there any lingering concerns, or was this season just a nice step in the right direction?
I'd be concerned about the defense going forward. You want it to be better. I'd be concerned about what the future is going to look like for some of the homegrowns, what the Chris Brady of the next 3 years is going to look like, how long he remains in Chicago, the Brian Gutierrez of it all, what Sergio Orahel looks like next year. Mauricio Pineda and Gutman will still be around. So there is a lot of that, but 2025 was a step in the right direction. All they had to do was make the postseason for it to be successful, and I was thinking that was going to be on like 42 points, right? So for them to do it in the way that they did, there's a lot of things to be successful about. I would be hoping, if I were a fan, that Jonathan Bamba takes that year 2 step forward. In MLS.
The proverbial Pep Guardiola
that
second
would
season.
be my excitement, because he's the highest paid player on the team, 5th or 9th highest paid player in the league. Didn't play like it this year. If he can replace, Zinchenko's not going to play as well next year. Like, sorry, not sorry. Like, good luck.
He's not going to be 30.
It was a statistical anomaly.
He got 15 assists from an expected assists of like 3. It was
insane.
Obnoxious.
Yeah, so you need him to step into that role year 2 in MLS, not coming from a season in Europe. He is the one guy who you should be excited for in the offseason, because he should be that guy that elevates the team as a whole.
Somebody in the chat asks, is Barroso going to improve enough to become a full-time starter? He's good enough at soccer already. Is his fitness going to improve? Because if Barroso stays healthy, again, that's another big what-if of this Fire season. If Barroso stays healthy all year, no offense to Jonathan Dean, but in this 3-4-3 system, again, to make a Berhalter comparison, the idea is that Barroso is Serginho Dest. Like, that's the thought here. And so, like,
Leo's a nice guy.
Yeah, why'd you have to go there?
Yeah,
He's not kicking the ball away.
I meant in terms of his skill set and how a Gregg Berhalter team would like to employ him in possession. I should have specified. Leo, please do not boot any balls out of stadiums.
You also want him to be getting regular minutes, which is the idea. Yeah. No, I mean, look.
Anyway,
Tim, it's more of a credit to Dean, right? Like that he was able to push Leo that hard for that many minutes, and that's something that was an unexpected positive for the team, and meant they had a good quality option when Barroso wasn't healthy.
Right. And so then, Tim, your thoughts in terms of, if you're talking to Fire fans, what are you telling them about, where you think is a healthy place to be in terms of perspective right now?
I think it's overall just, like Colin was saying, like, happy. The team is in a good place. I think that unlike 2017, it feels like the team will be building to something bigger. I think it's going to be exciting to see the way that some of these names and players turn out. In the offseason, my biggest question is just like, what's the immediate plan going to be for, say, like the first 6 months if Franco's not healthy or stuff like that, or if players move out? And then, I have no inside information about this. Just what we've seen from the team for the third DP slot have been huge names. And are they going to continue to like look down that path, or are we going to see names that, people that are not MLS fans at all will recognize, casual soccer fans, like on the Son Heung-min level?
Yeah, because the other question is, Joe made the comment earlier, or maybe it was you, one of you guys said, it's more common for these big moves to happen in the summer.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing that has to be considered, though, this next year is it's a World Cup year. So if you're signing anybody in the summer, you're getting them post-World Cup, which probably means you're not going to actually see them playing soccer on the field for your team until like mid-August. So this is the sort of situation where if you wait, it's not really a signing for 2026 at that point.
And we don't know what the schedule is going to be for 2026. We were told that there's going to be a pause for at least,
the group stage at least.
Right. Yeah. So we'll have to see all that. I still think, the team was linked with Neymar last winter, right? It's not going to be Neymar again this winter, which is probably a major bullet dodge there.
The clicks were nice. The clicks were
The
really
clicks were
nice.
I really love the clicks.
Thank you for the traffic.
Yeah, thanks for
But
that.
I mean, like, you know, it's going to be interesting to see if there's some players that are maybe not really in favor with clubs that are, you know, huge clubs like Champions League competing clubs, and see if they get linked with the Fire this offseason. That'll be fun. But I think overall it's just going to be positive vibes.
Yeah, again, and I think fans now can be kind of settled that, hey, the Fire are going to take big swings. And if we get to, I don't know, mid-January and that's not going so well, you can be like, okay, let's say we're staying with the 2-4. Let's go down the list, and who can we go out and get a Philip Zinkernagel type at max TAM? Who can we go out and, you know, get a U22 player who looks really promising and who's maybe more of a punt in terms of long-term planning? But again, you're going to be in this experimental phase where, okay, Franco's not here yet. It's not the finished thing. No, again, I think that's the biggest thing. And when I think about the way we're going into this offseason is fans should be confident in Gregg Berhalter's plan for this team. Again, I think there was a lot of hope and optimism at the beginning of 2025. Now we've got a year of data that says, yeah, there's reason to believe that he knows what he's doing. There's lots of positive signs. There's going to be a lot of guys who were brought in this season. This is, I think, a thing we haven't seen in a long time for the Fire. The percentage of players who were signed this year who are going to play significant minutes next year, this is going to be the best turnover in terms of signings the Fire have seen in memory. Because every year it's, got to turn the roster over again.
Yep.
Oh boy, got to clear out half the roster. It's not that they're just tinkering at this point, but again, you can already look at it next season and say, okay, these 15 guys, they're going to be there, and of those 15, these 8 of them are going to be high-minute guys, and we're happy with them to be high-minute guys.
There's a lot of guys you're excited to see back if you're a fan, right? And, like, that's the other thing with the team's defense being the problem. It is so obviously, well, there's your problem, you know, looking at it where the break, like, just improving that, and then this team is, you know, in competing and probably getting a home field advantage in the first round of the playoffs, right? So you can see where the obvious pathway for improvement is, and it doesn't take that much to get those rewards.
No, right. I think that's the other thing, because Joe, as we get some final thoughts here, the front end of the team, even if Zinkernagel regresses a bit, but Bamba gets a bit better, you just look at the season, goal scoring's not, it's funny to be in a position where you're not worried where the goals are coming from. You know, this is no longer looking back a few years ago. It's like, hey, remember that Robert Baric actually hit double figures in the MLS season? It wasn't that bad. Like, now it's like, oh man, how many guys do you have in double figures is more of the question. And so it's just like, again, it's how great is this team going to be in 2026? I don't know, but you know what? They're going to still be fun to watch, and it's going to be enjoyable to be on the journey that this team is taking the fans on.
People pick up their calls now. They didn't under the previous regime, be it big teams in Europe, be it big agents around the world. This team has a much larger respect under Gregg Berhalter than it did in the previous regime. A lot of that was due to action and inaction and the way that it was negotiated. But now the world is seeing that this team is being operated on the sporting side very differently. The training center helps. The Andre Franco experiment of dude wanting to come to Chicago, playing well, then getting to stay is a really good selling point for this franchise, just because they're going to say, look, this guy wanted to be here. We said you got to prove it. He did prove it, but he got hurt, so we had to do it on reduced terms. He sat through all those processes and clearly is happy about it, at the United Center this morning. So clearly
bought a house recently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the Andre Franco thing, he was ready to buy a house like after making that debut against. There was that 2 weeks after the Philadelphia 3-0 loss in the regular season. He was ready to buy something then. Everyone's like, "Don't do that, dude! Like you just got here and didn't play particularly well in your debut." But it worked out. People want to be here. Guys like him want to be here, and it really is going to help. And I think they're actually going to have people who they're going to say no to people. Yeah. When was the last time the Chicago Fire got to say no to people? Because it was Heitz and Peltzer just scrambling for the 7th option.
Like the phone is ringing and it's not an insider that knows the chief sporting officer and his like best buddy from a long time ago, right?
Exactly.
Like it's a radically different world.
And it's something I think that's fun to watch develop, as this was kind of natural. There was the Sporting Club de Portugal connection that kind of came built in this season, and Leo Barroso was the fruit of that labor. You look at now the relationship they have at Porto, so that's 2 of the big clubs in Portugal. Jay Davila, Portugal is where teams first really saw him do anything before he kind of vanished for 6 months to Qatar and the Fire plucked him out of there. It's one of those situations where, you want to keep your options diversified, but if you want to look at a league out there that, has a really strong development pipeline and is producing a lot of guys into the world stage, Portuguese league is not a bad place to have a lot of resources.
It's where some of the top teams in like La Liga, the Premier League shop when they're looking for young guys. So if the Fire are in that same conversation, right?
And hey, Wolves are about to get relegated, so that's not going to be an option in the Premier League anymore.
Yeah. No, look, Jay Davila was linked with, I don't know how realistic some of these things were, but was linked with Leeds, right? Which is
Brighton too.
Yeah. And Brighton. So he was on the radar for some clubs in the biggest league in the world.
And clubs who you generally think know what they're doing
not
with their
Southampton, not Wolves. Yeah, right. A real club.
No. See, he has to go to Brighton first, and then Chelsea's allowed to be interested in him. That's the way these things work. On that note, we started today with a laugh. We end with a laugh, and I think that's a pretty good way to cap the season of CHGO Fire. Of course, if there is any really big news, like, if Brian Gutierrez gets sold to Chivas tomorrow, hello, emergency podcast, please don't do that. Give us at least a little breathing room on that one. But if there's any news of that magnitude, keep an eye out for emergency podcasts. Tim, Joe, thank you for being here. Tell the people where they can find what you guys are going to be up to in the offseason.
On Tap Sportsnet, just follow Joe Chatz or wherever. You'll find me. I've got some fun stuff up the pipeline.
Yeah. menandred97.com for news and writing. We also
go
have
vote in their fan awards ballot. I saw that link today. Go do that.
I thought you were just gonna say go vote. I was like, oh, we're doing that today.
Yeah, no.
And Tim Hotze on Blue Sky is where I'm most active. I'm also on Twitter.
Excellent. Well, thank you again to you guys for coming in today.
Thank you, Alex.
For your efforts throughout the season. Shout out to Sean Anderson behind the scenes. Shout out also to Joey Christopoulos and to Sarah Fitcher, who have been also behind the scenes making this show go this season. One quick last shout out to the jersey of the day, which is Edgewater Castle. Local team announced their teams are moving up to USL 2 and USLW, which does mean that the Edgewater Castle women's team is now the team within Chicago city limits that plays women's soccer at the highest level. So that's fun.
Shots fired.
Anyway, and then the men's team headed to USL League 2, so they get to take on, potentially Des Moines Menace and the 2014 New York Red Bulls next season if they are interested in doing that. Thank you to everybody for just watching today, watching all season, listening wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Alex Campbell saying so long, and we'll see you later on CHGO Fire.
We all silly like the mayor.